Salvation comes in an instant. Sanctification happens over a lifetime.
Welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back to another Crucible Project podcast. I'm your host today, James Damey, and man, I'm excited that you're listening. So I have a gentleman who has been a part of the Crucible Project for many years, who's gone through our 2-year program, who is just an incredible believer in the Crucible Project and the impact that it can have. And so I want to welcome Terry Gjeldum. Welcome, Terry. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks, James. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to chat with you today.
Well, absolutely. I'm so glad that you took the time to do this and tell us about your story. It's an incredible story that even just in chatting with you, I think I can relate to your story in some capacity, and would love to have you just start sharing however you'd like, and just what led up to you hearing about the Crucible Project and deciding that it was right for you.
Yeah, that's a great place to start because the first time I heard about this weekend, it was actually called Dare to Soar at the time, and this is back in November of 2008. And I heard about this from my brother Larry, and Larry, he was dying of cancer, and he he had hospice engaged, and he was 3 years older than
Wow.
me, and he he had hospice, and we were all taking turns going to his home and caring for him because he couldn't be left alone, and
Wow.
so my siblings and I would take turns going to his home, and so it was pretty close to a couple weeks prior to him passing away is when he mentioned to me and my wife, who's a nurse practitioner, she and Larry had mentioned that he's going away on a men's retreat, and it really shocked all of us because he was pretty much at home,
Wow.
and so when we had heard about him going away on this weekend, my wife kind of jumped in, put her nurse practitioner hat on, and was really concerned about his well-being because, yeah. Anyway, so he had multiple surgeries, and yeah, he was not doing well physically. He couldn't sleep in a bed, and he was on oxygen 100% of the time. And he's telling us he's going away on a men's retreat, and
Wow.
yeah, I was like, what the heck's going on here? And so
Yeah.
anyway, so my wife started asking him, how you going to get there? Because he couldn't drive. And, he had asked if the guy that was driving, if he smoked, because he couldn't smoke with oxygen on board and
Yeah.
in the car. And he thought he'd, sleep on a gym floor. He wasn't sure where he was going to be sleeping, but he was determined that he was going to go on this weekend. And so when he had come back, James, from this weekend on a Sunday night, he called my house, and my wife picked up the phone, and he basically wanted to let us know he got back from his retreat, and he quickly went to tell my wife that Terry's got to go on this weekend.
Wow.
And so my wife kind of said, "Hey, Larry's on the phone. He says you got to go on this weekend." And in all honesty, James, I thought, I'm not going on any kind of weekend. And
Yeah.
I think looking back on this, what came up for me was fear, and that why would I go? In my mind, I'm thinking, why would I go on a weekend of a guys that I don't know? And anyway, that's kind of the first I had heard about it. So he came to my house a couple days later, and he was standing in my kitchen. And I said, Lair, I says, how was your weekend? And he said, and I've never heard him say this before, he said it was life-changing.
Wow.
And so I waited for more. I waited for him to say more, and he didn't. And that
Huh.
I was surprised by that, because Larry was one to elaborate on things, to clarify things, but in this
Hmm.
case, he stopped there. And now I know why, but at the time I didn't. And so and the only other thing he said is, Terry, you got to go. And again,
Wow.
in my mind, I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't want to show him any disrespect. But in my mind was made up. I ain't going.
Hmm.
And I know now I couldn't put my finger on that initial reaction, but I know now it was fear.
Mm.
So anyway, about 2 weeks later, we got a call from the hospice nurse about a week later, and they said, Larry's take a turn for the worse, and
Wow.
have the family come. And so now I'm kneeling by his bedside
Mm.
and looking at him, face to face. And Larry had two sons at the time. They're around early 20s, late teens, and I was very
Yeah.
close to his two sons at the time, and David and John. And he said, Larry, you could tell he was really struggling, and I could just sense he was ready to enter into eternity
Wow.
with his Savior. And he looked at me and he said, Tara, he said, promise me. And he paused, and I thought he's going to say, I've never heard him ask me, promise me
Mm.
anything, but he's saying, Tara, promise me. He's looking at me in my eyes. Promise me, and I thought he was going to say, you'll watch over my two sons. And
Hmm.
he said, promise me you'll go on this weekend.
Wow.
So I finally said, for the first time, Lair, I'll go. And I had no choice. I respected my brother. Yeah, and this was November 2008, and I still feel tender about that
Mm.
conversation, because
Absolutely.
it was a life changing experience. It was the beginning of a change in my soul, and so I'm really grateful that he had asked me about, to promise him, because I did promise him. But
Yeah.
I'll pause there, James, just to kind of say that's the first time I heard about this weekend. Again, it was called Dare to Soar at the time, and it eventually turned into the Crucible project.
I'm amazed. You really had no choice. I mean, a man's final wish, final ask of you, and there's no way you could say no. I'm sure you felt that, and that you had to go on this. And I know April, my wife, and I went on the very final Dare to Soar weekend for married couples, and it also was amazing. Yeah, you're sitting there and you said yes. What did you feel after? I know there must have been so much that you were feeling in that moment, and then even after his passing. What helped you to follow through on that, apart from just the promise? But what helped you to follow through on that after?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. And so what helped me follow through on that is it was knowing, you know, it was a remarkable request, and I just
Mm-hmm.
knew that I was going to keep that promise one day. And what I'm grateful for, James, is that Larry didn't put a deadline on that request. He just said,
Yeah.
promise me you'll go. And then, so to see him pass, 24 hours later, seeing us take his
Mm.
last breath, November 23rd, 2008, at
Mm.
4:13 in the morning, it was a huge loss for me. He was one of my heroes. So,
Mm.
so anyway, the year finishes up. It goes into 2009, and all of a sudden now we're in the early 2010, and all of a sudden I had this desire to honor that request, to fulfill my promise, to keep that promise. And so March of 2010, I started what I normally do is with retreats is try to round up my buddies to go with.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
had a tradition of doing men's retreats locally near my home. So I figured, you know what, I want to say that I can. Basically, my intent was I can check it off the list.
Yeah.
That was the only reason why I was going. I wasn't going for any other reason
Yeah.
other than to check it off the list, to say, Larry, I went.
Sure.
I went.
Yeah.
And so because I wanted to be a man of my word. And what was really nice is I didn't, it wasn't reminded by anybody because it was a private conversation. But I just, for some reason, that spring of 2010, I figured I'm going to do it. I'm ready. I'm
Yeah.
ready. And then so anyway, what was unusual was had I have a lot of men friends that I've, a lot of guys that I've known since childhood that I have no problem rounding up and getting guys to go. But for this time, this event, for some reason, every I probably invited at least 10 men, and they all said no. And I thought, wow, this is really different. Um,
Yeah.
and I know why, because it was meant. I needed to be by myself. I see that now. But one of the things that was interesting was that one of the guys in my list of 10 men or so, nobody had ever heard of the Dare to Soar weekend before, now Crucible. But
Mm-hmm.
until I ran into one guy, his name's Rafael Morales. He goes by Mo. I called Mo and he said, "Hey, I'm already signed up for March." And I said,
Wow.
"What?" I said, "How did you hear about it?" And he said, "Well, I heard about it from Dan Kuiper." And Dan Kuiper was somebody that both Mo and I knew from our church, and and I respected Dan and trusted him. And I said, "Well, what did Dan say about it?" And Dan said to Mo, "It's a life changer." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, it's the second time I'm hearing this, life changing."
Man.
So again, what
Yeah.
reared up for me was fear, like, "Oh man, life changing, this has got to be pretty big."
Yeah.
And so I asked Mo. I said, "Mo, I signed up for May. I figured the weather's nice and it'll be kind of nice to be out and good weather and have a
Mm.
nice retreat." And Mo said, "Nope, I'm going in March." And so he went, and when he got back, he called me and I said, "Mo, how was it?" And he goes, "Tara, it was life changing." So it was that third time I'm hearing this, and that's all that was said. But again,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
got scared. I'm like, man, this
Mm-hmm.
is three guys I trust. They're both all saying life changing. I don't know what that means for me, but I was scared. But I was grateful that Mo was somebody I trusted that said, "Terry, you're going to be okay. You need to go." And so again,
Yeah.
that was kind of what was going on in my life up to this my first weekend.
Wow. You went on your weekend. You were able to voice, hopefully, or partly, somewhat of what you want, or step into that practice. What did you get what you wanted on the weekend?
Boy, I got more than I ever imagined on the weekend. And
Hmm.
I got to kind of clarify what I mean by that is going into the weekend, I really struggled with what I wanted. And I think the best that I came up with going into the weekend was that I wanted to be more assertive.
Hmm.
Again, fear, I was afraid of speaking up or sharing something that I wanted just out of fear of rejection, or yeah, just to be able to, yeah, it was afraid. And I couldn't put my finger on it until the
Hmm.
weekend.
Mm-hmm.
What was behind all this fear? But because of this fear was blocking me from living a such a much more richer life. I just thought, well, what I want for myself, I want to somehow learn to be more assertive on this weekend. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I, kind of came in with, but that's not what I ended up coming away with. It was much, much, much greater than that. Um,
Wow.
and that new desire, that new want came up on Saturday for me. But I was really afraid, to go there. But I guess one of the things that was thinking about as far as what I wanted, it was more around some of the relationships that had issues. And so when I tried to go down that path of
Mm.
expressing that want early on in the weekend, I was challenged in a respectful way that says, that's understandable that, you want this relationship, issue to kind of work on that. And just the fact of challenged in a way of saying those relationships aren't here with you now, so that's really not an option. And so it was more
Right.
or less, it helped me to kind of think, gosh, I got to dig a little deeper here. This is not
Yeah.
about, you know, this is about what's going on in my own soul, and that's
Right.
kind of the part that I've learned. What I was struggling with to understand was
Mm,
what was going on in my soul that I was wrestling with, and that was fear. That was my
mm,
initial weekend. It was all around fear, and it was around fear of, yeah, what I wanted for myself. And this didn't come up till Saturday night. Was I There was a part of me that I felt stupid,
mm.
and that feeling of feeling stupid started when I was around 10 years old.
Wow.
That was something that I pushed down so deep down in my soul that I buried it. I didn't want to ever talk about that, how
Wow.
that all started. But I carried that belief from 10 years old till my initial weekend. For 39 years, I carried that belief of myself that I was truly a stupid person.
Oh, wow.
When I couldn't come up with anything, I couldn't bring these relationships, I thought, okay, well, I guess I want to explore this thought that I have of myself and really be vulnerable enough to talk about this fear and of people finding out that I really am stupid, because I believed it with all my heart that I was.
Wow.
But I didn't want to talk about it until Saturday night.
Man, so that was something you actually believed about yourself and you felt like you had to hide it from everybody else.
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
That was the
That's
biggest secret
incredible.
I carried around. I wouldn't tell my closest friends
Mm,
that I truly was stupid, and I believed it, and I didn't want anybody to find out that I really was. And
mm.
I so to be able to open that Pandora's box to talk about that was probably the scariest thing I ever did up until this point in my life, was to actually open up and talk about that.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
That's incredible. So the word you kept hearing from Larry and from your friend was that the weekend for them was life changing. Was that your experience also?
yeah, and probably because of that, this process on Saturday night, by the time this process was over, the change for me was that there was a shift in and I saw for the first time in 39 years that I was not stupid.
Mm,
And to see that and to believe that change, the feeling that I had realizing I wasn't stupid,
mm,
I the amount of love that I felt for the men that were on the weekend that helped me see that for the first time, and
mm.
to release that was priceless. I felt incredible support that I've never experienced my whole life, and safety that
Wow.
that I could actually open up that part of my soul and see that I really wasn't, and I'll be forever grateful. And that was May of 2010 is when I
Mm,
that life change in that area of my life changed, and from this till this day,
mm.
um, I've never thought of myself as stupid.
Wow.
And so I'm grateful that these men helped me through this weekend to see. So to come out of the weekend feeling this peace in my soul that I'm no longer stupid. I don't have to hide something that was never true. The trajectory of that, carrying that around, no longer carrying that around, that
Yeah.
it impacted so much of my life. The way I parented, the
Yeah.
way I just to have compassion for an awareness of others carrying things around, perhaps hidden or whatnot.
Yeah. The weekend, a lot of people think that going to the weekend is the scariest part. I am a firm believer that the scariest part is coming home from the weekend. I don't know if you'd agree, but I gotta say, you've spent your life believing this thing, and then all of a sudden all of that's gone. All of a sudden, after your work, obviously it took work to get there, I'm sure, but coming home and having a brand new ideal about yourself, a brand new truth about yourself that you found, how did that affect your workplace, your family, just your everyday? What happened there?
Yeah, that's a great question, James.
Mm-hmm.
How it impacted me, James, was in a way of um, carrying this. I would say that I was more my kids. At the time were almost all of them were teenagers, 18, 16, 15, and 12, right?
Wow. Uh-huh.
And so prior to the weekend, just thinking about me as a father parenting my almost four teenagers and carrying around this fear and this feeling of stupid and dealing with parenting issues at their ages, I realized that using authority was no longer working,
Mm-hmm.
and it was causing more. My kids at the time would have said that I was be described as strict and rigid and black and white and
Mm-hmm.
not approachable, and when my kids wouldn't listen or this or that, if I had to discipline them, it would be either yelling or spanking with a paddle or grounding and this and that. And that
Yeah.
was the only way I kind of knew how to. Those were the only tools that I knew how to use
Yeah.
up until this point. So coming out of the weekend, learning new skills as far as just being able to understand my own emotions and being honest and authentic, being able to use those skills in my relationships with my kids. My kids would tell you, in fact, my son mentioned the other day that he saw this transformation. He said, Dad, you have become softer through this work in the Crucible
Wow.
project. You become more approachable. And what a compliment that to hear my own son and to share that with me. It's really helped me to be a better father,
Yeah.
and to be more like Jesus with
Wow.
this transformation in my own soul. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it was difficult, and I just remember wanting on Sunday afternoon before we left. I remember wanting to start my own create my own weekend, right? And asking one of
Wow.
the leaders, how do I start one of these weekends in my neck of the woods? And
Mm-hmm.
the not knowing all the effort that goes into putting on a weekend and the
Yeah.
resources,
Mm-hmm.
but that was my excitement. Was that boy? I tasted the scandalous grace of Jesus
Mm.
through these men
Yeah.
that listened to my soul, that created a safe place where I could be honest and authentic with what's going on, and to be able to come out a different part of my soul healed, feeling so much support and love that was just so much salve to my wounds of feeling stupid all these years, and not now
Yeah.
coming out knowing I wasn't, and I believed it with all my heart and soul. And so I got more than I ever imagined. And so
Man.
this was what was interesting, James, was that now I'm walking back to the park, to my car on Sunday afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, I just looked up to the heavens and I asked God if it was possible to tell my brother Larry that I kept my promise.
Oh
It
man.
was a year and a half later, and
Mm-hmm.
tears streaming down my eyes, tears of joy, and just
Mm-hmm.
felt so much love from these men that were perfect strangers going in Friday night.
Yeah.
And so I really thought I was done with this. I call it soul work.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I would ever come back. However, I found out that there was opportunities to pay it forward, to be able to give back
Mm.
by volunteering to staff, just like the men did for my weekend. So
Yeah.
I did want to I did want to sign up to be staff, and I did the following November. And so I thought, yeah, I want to give back. And I remember staffing November of 2010 and realizing by watching the next group of men coming in on their initial weekend, watching them do their work and helping support them like I was supported. I
Yeah.
saw things on the weekend, heard things on the weekend that triggered things in my own soul where I realized, oh my gosh, I got some more work to do. And that's when I
Yeah.
realized that I wasn't done. And then I heard about other opportunities that the Crucible project offered, and so I staffed a couple more times, and my wife was seeing this change in me and encouraged me to stay connected through this group of this ministry. At the time, it was just men,
Wow. Yeah.
um, and so I heard about this 2-year program, and again, I'm all about the biggest bang for the buck, and I had heard that the 2-year program that the Crucible offered included 4 more weekends, 2 per year, and it
Yeah.
kind of emphasized leadership, and in fact talked about sexuality and mission, and those
Hmm.
were really important topics to me that I really
Yeah.
never explored before. So anyway, I'll pause right there, and I just realized that I wasn't done, and I wanted more, even though it was really, really difficult for me to to go back to these wounds in my soul, or these messages that I picked up along the way, to explore those.
Absolutely, I know it's something that I've experienced that same thing in my life, and I want to echo that. Is that this is something that once you start to take a look inward, once you start to see those things and see the possibilities that can come from that, it's something you want to keep doing. You want to keep being a part of, and it sounds like when you went home, the difference was visible to your wife. It was different. It was visible to your kids. If you could wrap up what your family received into one word, if you could wrap that up into one word, what would that be?
Yeah, I would say one word would be loving, or maybe tenderness, or yeah, maybe softer, a
Hmm.
softer
Yeah.
part. They saw a softer dad, or more tender dad, or a loving dad. I'd say those 3 words kind of would describe the change they saw in me. And what's amazing, that change that took place, I realize now that change was in my soul, and that change has lasted. It is not worn off. I know I've done a lot of different things throughout my life, experiences that brought different feelings and emotions. Some change that lasted, a couple days, a week, a month. These changes in my own soul has given me more confidence. I feel like I've become more flexible and more patient. Definitely have more peace. But it didn't all happen in
Yeah.
one weekend. It was, it's been over these last 13 years of this work.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And one thing we haven't talked about yet that I'd love to hear about is during this time you have a career story that is pretty unique, I would say. So maybe you'll tell us about that and just how this made a change also in your career.
Yeah, I would say, again, that fear that I carried around, different types of fear. Some of it was because of being bullied as a kid and, getting hurt. The other fear was, as I mentioned, about feeling stupid. But so this other one, that I guess in my career, I would tie this change in my career when I finally took a look at how fear was affecting my career. And I could say that it tied back to some of the bullying that I had received in school growing up,
Mm,
multiple occasions, and
hmm.
even the feeling stupid, of believing that. The combination of those two things really hindered my career growth. And
Yeah.
so my first job out of college. I went to 3 different colleges. I was hoping to play baseball, but that didn't pan out. So I ended up
Mm,
taking a computer class at Purdue in Hammond, Indiana. My oldest sister recommended that, and I ended up getting a degree in computer information systems. But again, this was all pre-Crucible, and so
yeah.
knew that this career, this degree of computers, computer information systems, and getting this degree 7.5 years after out of high school, hanging up the cleats, and then getting this first job at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, downtown Chicago.
Mm,
37 years ago. That first 20 years was in IT, and again, this was still before Crucible. I carried a lot of fear, so I saw a lot of people that I worked with, colleagues, that really moved up pretty quick in their
mm,
careers and advanced, and I carried a lot of fear around. I was afraid of, just um, stepping out and trying this and that in my career, and just out of fear of getting hurt somehow. But through this 2 year program that I signed up for after my initial weekend started in 2012, started attending as part of the 2 year program some of these leadership weekends, and
mm,
had
mhm.
dealt with some of those things going on in my own soul. By working through those blocks or barriers of in my leadership, of how I viewed myself internally as a leader and how I saw the world and opportunities to lead, by
Mm,
working through these things, I came out of those weekends with the support of my brothers, Crucible brothers, and coaching and whatnot, with more confidence and
yeah.
more passion, and so it really gave me that transformation of my soul. Gave me the I felt the courage to be able to step out and, yeah, to be able to take more chances, or to be more assertive, or to be more confident and speaking up, where it allowed me to have conversations with my management team to move up in the ranks of my still my same company I started with 37 years ago. So that again is priceless in my own career, just to be able to enjoy my job so much more after I started this journey with Crucible, just to be able to use the gifts and abilities God has given me to have a mission and
Mm,
purpose, and to
mhm.
bring that to my relationships and my job and my career. It's just, again, it's been priceless. It's had so many impacts on my life.
That's awesome. And so, today, looking back, all the work you've done, all of the times you've stood in the gap for other men, and just the continuation of finding your mission, and all of this packaged up. If you were able to talk to Larry right now, after all of this it has been completed in your life and your work, what would you say to him?
Boy, I would start with a, a big thank you for challenging me, encouraging me to go on this weekend, and also for having me promise him that I would
Mm,
go, because he knew me. He knew that's what it would take for me
yeah.
to take a chance like that, to step into my fear. Yeah, I do look forward to sitting down with him. When the Lord takes me
Mm,
home to be with him in
yeah.
heaven one day, I look forward to having this conversation like you're talking about, James, to let him know all the how this work has really changed me as a person, and has expanded my heart to receive more of God's love, and to love Him more, and Jesus, and to allow and trust the Holy Spirit when He prompts me to do things and say things, and in turn to improve the relationships in my inner circle with my wife and my
Mm,
adult children, my grandkids now. To It's just as enriched, just the tools that I have now, and the healing that I've received in my own soul, my heart and soul and mind,
yeah.
has allowed me to experience a much greater joy in my life. And I feel like it is well with my soul now, even though I know I
Wow.
still have things to work through. I've heard it once said that our souls are like an onion. There's many layers, and
Yeah.
throughout life, those layers of the onion have bruises on them, and I've worked through a lot of layers of my onion soul, and but I know there's still more in there that I
Mm,
struggle with. But I have a group of men that I meet with once a month. It's a post 2 year group with Crucible. That
wow.
there's 11 guys in our group. That it's just a priceless get together to be able to check in with these
Yeah.
men, because life is hard. Life is hard, and
Yeah.
it's this place that I go to once a month. It's the safest place that I can go to check in, to let people know what's going on in my heart and soul and experience, and to be able to express that without judgment, and to feel cared for, and to be able to
Yeah.
reciprocate that. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, and I know a lot of times the idea that this type of thing could either take the place of church or anything is something we want to let everybody know. No, you gotta still go to church. You gotta still get that connection. But you said it so well that this is the only place that has that safety for you to be so vulnerable and so real. And so people that are missing that in life, this could be a place to find that for them. And I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it sounds like there's never an ending to what we need to be working on and finding out about ourselves. But at the point where it gets hard, you said it's like peeling back an onion, and it gets hard when you start doing that. At the point it gets hard, we have to remember those people, remember to trust those people that took us there in the first place. Like Larry, for you, he believed in you, he knew your story, and he said go. And at some point when it gets really hard, we have to just trust that person and trust that what we're doing is going to have a benefit. It's gonna bring you to a different place in life.
Yeah, that's really well said, James. And one of the things that I what was so unique about, from the very first weekend till now, are the leaders that, whether it's leading a weekend or the leaders that are leading a group. I'm a very visual learner, and
Mm-hmm.
I learn by watching others. And when I see the power of each of the leaders that I've been part of, or weekends where the leaders that I've experienced on my weekends, whether I was a participant or staff,
Mm-hmm.
would always lead by example. And that was huge for me to say, hey, let me go first, and then
Yeah.
allow me to see, okay, this guy's, I can do that. If he can do that, I can do that too. But I
Yeah.
just appreciate that, gave me a lot of safety, and
Mm.
it tapped into my learning style, is show me how this is done. And to see leaders really be vulnerable or transparent or authentic with me allowed me to have the courage to do the same. And that's where, and certainly, the focal point being Jesus, our
Yeah.
Savior and Lord, right? He's the ultimate role model for me. And
That's right.
so I just love the fact that through the power of the Holy Spirit, that it's a supernatural change in the soul. And I would say that I heard it once said, James, that it's just such a beautiful thing that I could relate to, is that salvation comes in an instant.
Mm.
Sanctification happens over a lifetime.
Wow. Yeah.
So I see this Crucible community as the sanctification for Christian men and women. It's a lifelong process. And people that haven't experienced the sanctification piece, having a place where they can examine. God tells us, about two greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That
Mm-hmm.
soul part was a missing piece for me.
Mm.
What is the soul? God's telling us love Him with all our soul. Well, that's kind of what the Crucible focuses in on. It's the soul work
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
that's the beautiful part that I've learned through this ministry, is to take care of my soul and to examine what's going on in my soul. And if I could somehow figure out ways of processes and people that can help me look at those parts of my soul that I don't really like or I wrestle with, and I'm willing to step into some of these processes or exercise, I can experience that sanctification in my soul to be more like Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So before I let you go, I gotta ask you, Terry, are you gonna encourage your kids to go through this too, the Crucible Project?
If they were right here, James, they
Yeah.
would tell you how many times I've encouraged them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, my wife went. She went on the women's weekend a couple years ago. I was so glad that she went.
Awesome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've invited each of my adult children to go on their own weekend. And what I've learned is, James, it's, and I can look at my own story.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 48 years to get to 48 to actually think about going. And it took a promise on my brother's deathbed for me to go. So
Mm.
it
Yeah.
helps me be more patient and know that it's God's timing. People have to be ready to do these kinds of weekends. It's not for everybody, and it's not. it's really a timing issue, and
Yeah.
for those that are listening out there, you'll know when it's your time. You got to be ready to say, hey, I want to just check it out. I'm ready to look at something perhaps in my own life that I want, that I don't have, but I want.
Yeah.
And so you'll know when that time is. And just my encouragement is the people that have invited you to go on a weekend. I'm talking to the listeners, whoever's listening
Hmm.
now. It's a good chance you trust that person somehow. And that's what it took for me to go. Is I trusted my brother, and he wouldn't set me up for failure or to hurt me. So that's what it took for me, and to trust the process. The processes
Yeah.
throughout the weekends. That was the best advice that's helped me looking back. Is if you can trust the person that's inviting you, and then once you go on your weekend, trust the process, and you're open for change, then you'll know what that's your time. But it's priceless to me. My experiences through this ministry is just priceless.
Absolutely, I agree, and the caliber of leadership, the caliber of staff that's there to support you, it's I've never seen anything like it. So I agree with you. It's definitely worth taking the risk. Well, Terry, thank you so much for sharing your story, for taking the time to just be able to express what it's done for you, how it's helped and created life change in your life. Thank you for doing that today.
You're welcome, James. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share this great opportunity for Christian men and women out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, if you've been thinking about it, if you've been thinking as you're listening to our podcast and thinking maybe I just need to take that step, I encourage you to do that. You'll be supported, and you never know what you're going to walk away with. Even as Terry told us, a lot more than he ever thought he'd get, and I know the same is true with me and so many other people that have gone. So, thank you for listening into this podcast, and I hope that you remember that our life is a journey and it's one step at a time. So let's take this journey together. And the journey, as always, continues. Thank you for listening.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening. And don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.